Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. We are expecting a few more guests to join in, so I request all of you to kindly bear with us. We will begin in a short while. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, everyone, for patiently waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all set to begin today's discussion, the Dun & Bradstreet Budget Manthan 2023. I'm your host for the day, Kaustav Bhattacharya. So without further ado, let's kickstart Dun & Bradstreet's Budget Manthan 2023. The Union Budget is one of the most awaited regulatory updates, closely followed by all industry sectors to gauge significant impact on their finances and expenses. The Union Budget 23-24 has set the perfect blueprint for steering the Indian economy towards a sustained high growth trajectory post-pandemic, aligned with the expectations of taxpayers of the country amidst geopolitical developments. Thus, the theme for Budget Manthan 2023 is Union Budget 2023, a golden opportunity to leapfrog economic growth. On that note, let us dive straight into our first session for the day. It is an introductory note, and to present this note, I will call upon Mr. Avinash Gupta, the Managing Director and CEO of India for Dun & Bradstreet. Mr. Gupta has a strong global background and brings more than 3 decades of experience and a vast network of business relationships. He has worked extensively in financial services, including M&A, equity and debt financing, private equity placement, and advisory across EMENA and Asia. Prior to joining Dun & Bradstreet in 2021, Mr. Gupta worked with Rabo Equity Advisors, where he was the managing director since 2018. Over the years, he has held various leadership positions in various institutions such as Deloitte India, HSBC, UBS, Barings, Citibank, Falcon Capital, and Alpine Capital. Mr. Gupta also sits on the National Executive Committees of Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry FICCI and Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry of India ASSOCHAM.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the Dun & Bradstreet Budget Manthan 2023. Thank you for joining us as we analyze the Union Budget for the year 23-24. As the world looks upon India to be a major force to drive global growth this year, the government has delivered a budget which is credit positive, and it establishes a sustainable growth framework to achieve macroeconomic stability, a prerequisite for attracting the interest of global investors, which is supremely important for our country's growth. Appreciably, the Union Budget not only emphasizes on the top-down approach to growth, that is, focusing on substantial capital outlay, but it also has placed significant emphasis on the growth of the pyramid by trying to unleash the potential of the primary sector, promoting cooperatives and the last mile development. The record allocation of capital expenditure to 3.3% of GDP in fiscal year 2024, which is almost at a 2-decade high, could crowd in the private sector investment as the market borrowings have been set below expectations. Given that green financing is a priority for public policy across countries globally, initiatives taken in this area along with green credit program will accelerate the pace of credit disbursement towards green initiatives. The focus on digitization across the board, green economy and data infrastructure, along with thrust for technology transformation, will be the key growth pivots. These will open a plethora of opportunities for startups, fintechs and MSMEs, establishing India as a preferred country for foreign investments. The thrust on energy transition for sustainable growth establishes India's credibility in its efforts towards achieving its climate change targets. Importantly, enhancing the scope for DigiLocker to securely share documents will facilitate ease of doing business, thus driving new growth avenues, especially for the digital lending framework for MSMEs. And this is very exciting for me and all my colleagues at Dun & Bradstreet. The government continues to focus on reduced compliance and decriminalization of legal provisions, which should further help in promoting India as an alternate business destination for global investors and multinational corporates. Through the 4 areas of transformation, that is, economic empowerment of women, artisans, tourism, and green growth via 7 priorities to achieve an inclusive green growth, the government has strongly laid down the blueprint for its growth strategy for the remainder of this decade. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great agenda set out for you this afternoon to help you decode the finer points of this year's union budget. I personally am very excited and looking forward to listening to the experts in this room as they shed light on the government's roadmap for economic growth and India's self-reliance through the budget. And finally, the unveiling and release of the fruit of our labor by many colleagues of mine, the 2023 edition of the Dun & Bradstreet Budget Manthan publication, a reliable resource on the impact analysis of the Union Budget 2023-2024. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. It was wonderful listening to you. Very thought-provoking and interesting insights, I must say, about the budget. Thank you once again. We now invite our keynote speaker for the evening today, Shri Sanjeet Singh, an Indian Revenue Service officer of 1991 batch. Mr. Sanjeet Singh is the senior advisor with National Institution for Transforming India, Niti Aayog, where he looks at policy issues relating to trade, commerce, and industry, as well as economic and finance and disinvestment-related issues. He is also the coordinator for Niti Aayog for India's G20 presidency-related matters. Upon joining the Indian Civil Service, he underwent extensive courses in corporate law and direct tax law, public administration and management, etc. He has worked with various government departments in addition to his parent Department of Income Tax, including Department of Commerce, SEZ's and Northeast Asia Division, Ministry of Rural Development, PMGSY Panchayati Raj, and Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI. He holds a postgraduate diploma in public administration from École Nationale d'Administration, Paris, France, and a bachelor's degree in law.
Thank you for inviting me to deliver the keynote address at the Dun & Bradstreet Budget Manthan 2023. We will be discussing and analyzing the impact of the Union Budget 2023. The budget of a nation plays a crucial role in determining the priorities and goals of the government, as well as the well-being of its citizens. It's a reflection of the country's economic and financial standing and provides insight into the government's plans for addressing various challenges and opportunities. Union Budget of 2023-24 is in many ways not an ordinary annual budget. With India well into its G20 presidency, we are steering an ambitious people-centric agenda to address global challenges and to facilitate sustainable economic development, which will also demonstrate to the world, especially the global south, how India has demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of global headwinds such as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, federal tightening, and global supply chain disruptions. This is the budget that the entire world is watching as India emerges as the bright spot in an otherwise bleak global scenario. Today, we will look closely at the budget and examine how it affects various segments of society. Let's start with what the budget is not. It is not a populist budget, as many had opined it would be, being the last full budget before the general elections. Having put this out of the way, let me say that this is a budget that keeps the idea of Vikasit Bharat, or India as an advanced nation, at the center and presents a long-term vision that embodies the spirit of Sabka Saath or Sabka Vikas, a vision of inclusive growth. The budget successfully captures the looming global macroeconomic uncertainties while providing a roadmap for fostering resilience and accelerating growth as the Indian economy moves forward in our Amrit Kal. This has therefore been termed as the first budget of Amrit Kal. The Economic Survey 2022-23, which was presented a day earlier, had stated that India's economic recovery was complete and that backed by a strong domestic demand, India's GDP growth expected to remain robust in FY 2024. The Economic Survey held out many cues for transforming India into the bright spot in the gloomy global economic scenario. The targeted growth rate of 6 to 6.8% outlined by the Economic Survey had hinted at the need for higher capex and the imperative for boosting consumption. It had also outlined the need for supporting the stressed MSMEs. For India to reap demographic dividends, skilling had been highlighted as a vital ingredient. The Chief Economic Advisor in his speech emphasized the role and importance of Make in India and Atmanirbharta. On the fiscal front, the Economic Survey strongly had argued in favor of continuing fiscal discipline, even in an election year. Given this context, we can emphatically say that the Union Budget 2023 has fulfilled all the major expectations. Let's analyze why I make this assertion. The Finance Minister had highlighted the government's vision for Amrit Kal through three broad priorities. First, opportunities for citizens with focus on the youth, or the Amrit PD. Second, growth and job creation. Third, strong and stable macroeconomic environment. Let me base my analysis on some of the key thrust areas of the budget. First, let's talk about fiscal discipline. The revised estimates have reaffirmed that the fiscal deficit target of 6.4% of GDP will be met. A glide path that inspires confidence across the board has also been provided over the next 2 years. The fiscal deficit for FY24 has been set at 5.9% of GDP, a 50 basis point reduction, with the goal of consolidating it over the next 2 years so that the fiscal deficit is less than 4.5% for FY26. We can also expect a continued increase in capex over the next 2 fiscal years, which will have positive externalities, and with the improvement in the economy's logistic costs, this will further increase India's global competitiveness and boost exports. In this context, the announcement of a pilot program for result-based budgeting is also being seen as a very progressive fiscal management move. Coming to the capex boost to the economy, following a consistent approach which we have seen over the past 8 years, where the government has consistently hiked the allocation for capital spending, the Finance Minister has announced an increase in capital expenditure by 33% to rupees 10 lakh crore, which is over 3% of the GDP. States are also being allowed to raise up their capex spending to rupees 1.3 lakh crore via 50-year interest-free loans. This is consistent with the government's goal of making India a developed economy by 2047, as capital spending has much higher multiplier effect, 2.5 times in India's case. Capital spending contributes more to economic output than revenue spending by creating a new employment opportunities, stimulating economic growth, and raising living standards for all. And this reflects very clearly in the government's intent. The massive investment in railways roads, highways, and housing will not only increase demand for heavy equipment, cement, steel, and other commodities, but more importantly, will also create jobs. Now, let's talk about the boost to consumption. The changes to personal income tax are intended to encourage taxpayers to switch to the new tax regime, in which tax slabs have been increased and the rates have been reduced. Acting as a strong nudge behavior, it is encouraging individuals to switch to a new and simpler tax regime. There is expectation that this will lead to higher disposable incomes in the hands of individuals, thereby boosting consumption. Also, the highest tax rate of 37%, which has been applicable on those individuals with income above 5 crores, has been brought down to 25%. This will allay some of the concerns about high net worth individuals. A 66% increase in allocation to the PM Awas Yojana, which is a housing scheme, will also result in rural job creation, therefore supporting rural consumption. Talking about Atmanirbharta, the government had previously faced criticism for raising import duties and portraying Atmanirbharta as inward looking. Amidst the economic theories oscillating between complete free trade and complete protectionism, the government chose the middle path of pragmatism. Lowered tariffs on intermediate inputs and raw materials, such as inputs for electric vehicles and lithium battery production, will help in fixing the inverted duty structure issue. This will also ensure that in the near future, India will play a much larger role in the global value chains. Coming to India reaping the demographic dividend, several announcements in the budget for the youth have been made, and the youth have been referred to as the Amrit Peedhi. This is also referring to our young demography, and that will reap the dividends in the Amrit Kal, or the period up to 2047, when India aspires to be a developed nation. Announcement on equipping the youth with new age skills, as well as a nation pan-Indian apprenticeship scheme and the National Skill Development Scheme 4.0 will focus towards accomplishing this. Several other announcements have been made regarding skilling initiatives in fields such as nursing and tourism, both of which have a high job potential in India and globally. Supporting our MSME sector is a major thrust area of the government and finds reflection in this budget too. Several announcements have been made to assist MSMEs, the most important of which is a continuation of the credit guarantee line for MSMEs, with an additional allocation to the corpus of rupees 9,000 crore, which is expected to facilitate an additional collateral-free guaranteed credit of rupees 20,000 crore. Furthermore, credit costs will also be reduced by about 1%, thereby giving a huge boost to our MSME sector. The PM Vishwakarma Kaushal Samman, which is a package of assistance for traditional artisans and craftspeople, has been announced by the Honorable FM to enable them to improve quality, scale, and reach of their product and integrating them with the MSME value chain. The One District, One Product scheme will use unity malls to showcase and sell products as well as to support micro enterprises, and announcements have been made to assist MSMEs in accessing the markets. I would next like to speak of ease of doing business. The business regulatory environment of a country is particularly important and influential determinant of its economic growth levels. The government has announced that more than 39,000 compliances have been reduced and more than 3,400 legal provisions have been decriminalized in order to boost manufacturing and investment in the country. Other important measures, including one-stop solution for ID and address updates using DigiLocker and Aadhaar, PAN as a common business identifier for businesses, and a unified filing process for submitting the same information to multiple agencies, are all expected to boost the ease of doing business in our country. This budget reasserted the commitment towards sustainable growth. Announcements about green growth, such as the allocation of 35,000 crore for energy transition and PPP-based battery energy storage system with viability gap funding, and allocations for renewable energy evacuation are encouraging. a green credit program to incentivize environmentally sustainable corporate actions is consistent with the Prime Minister's global life philosophy, which is catalyzing an environment conscious lifestyle movement. These actions will ensure that India pursues the Panchamrit and net zero carbon emissions by 2070. A renewed emphasis on millets, including renaming them as Sri Anna, is an important aspect of the budget that can serve multiple objectives of sustainability, nutritional and trade objectives. It will ensure establishing massive decentralized storage capacity, promoting contribution of cooperatives, increasing agriculture and fisheries credit, establishing agriculture accelerator fund, and building digital public infrastructure for agriculture. Lastly, but importantly, the government's philosophy of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas has facilitated inclusive development to ensure no one is left behind. Overall priority for the underprivileged, which the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned as Vanchito Ko Varyata, has been the underlying theme of the budget. Farmers are being empowered by building a digital public infrastructure which will enable inclusive farmer-centric solutions and promote agri-industry startups. The PM Vishwakarma Kaushal Samman, which I spoke of, aims to unlock the potential of thousands of artisans and craftspeople across the country. Priority is also being given to the abolition of the inhuman practice of manual scavenging. All cities and towns have been announced will now be able to switch from manhole to machine hole mode with 100% mechanical septic tank and sewer desludging. To improve their socio-economic condition, the PVTG, or the particularly vulnerable tribal groups development mission, is expected to provide tribal populations with habitations and basic facilities such as safe housing, clean drinking water and sanitation, improved access to education, health and nutrition, road and telecom connectivity, and sustainable livelihood opportunities. 15,000 crores have been allocated for this purpose by the government over the next 3 years. Missions such as eliminating sickle cell anemia will necessitate universal screening of 7 crore people aged between 0 to 40, and most of these are in the tribal areas, and which will directly benefit from this wonderful measure. Further, the budget demonstrates not only what the government has done, but also what it has not done. The budget did not cave into the populist demands or expectations of large giveaways in the run-up to the 2024 elections. There have been no populist schemes introduced despite the pre-budget hype. The government has also introduced alignment of the budget for schemes like Manrega, which is now pegged at rupees 60,000 crores. This serves as a nudge to a part of the workforce that has migrated to rural hinterlands to return to labor-intensive sectors such as housing, construction, and contact services industries such as tourism and hotels. This will also help in addressing issues of disguised unemployment in agriculture and a workforce shift from agriculture to manufacturing and services. This budget re-emphasizes the government's unequivocal commitment towards macroeconomic stability and fiscal discipline. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts. I wish the Budget Manthan all success.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. Truly engrossing and thought-provoking insights that you've shared with all of us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to one of the highlights of the day, the much-awaited release of our publication, the Budget Manthan 2023. The publication presents a comprehensive impact analysis of the Union budget on the macroeconomy and on 21 major sectors with ratings assigned to them based on the likely impact of the announcements on each individual sector. This becomes a useful guide for businesses and decision makers to plan their activities for the upcoming fiscal. And to release the publication, may I request our panelists present today, Dr. Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist, Dun & Bradstreet, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, Chairman of Shailesh Haribhakti and Associates, Chartered Accountants, Mr. Ravi Mahajan, tax partner for EY, and Mr. Anil Talreja, partner Deloitte, who are present with us today to participate in a very interesting discussion around the budget announcements to release the Budget Manthan 2023 Impact Analysis publication. So now, I would definitely urge all of you to grab your copy of the Budget Manthan 2023, which is available on the Dun & Bradstreet India website, which is www.dnb.co.in. The publication will also be circulated among CXOs of leading corporates globally, SMEs and mid-corporates, and government ministries. It is also available on our website. Like I said, www.dnb.co.in. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the key highlight of today's discussion, our panel discussion that is ready on the topic Union Budget 2023, a golden opportunity to leapfrog the economic growth. We have a very strong lineup of eminent speakers who will provide their views. Just allow me a few more minutes to introduce each of them to you, and then I will hand it over to the panel. First, we have with us Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, Chairman of Shailesh Haribhakti and Associates, Chartered Accountants, a man who has worn many hats in the corporate world and raised standards of various organizations so high that people consider him a serial innovator, pioneer, teacher, speaker, author, analyst, entrepreneur, and citizen of the world. Mr. Haribhakti is not only a chartered and cost accountant, certified internal auditor, a certified financial planner, fraud examiner, but also a board chairman, audit committee chairperson, and an independent director at some of the country's most preeminent organizations. He is a global thought leader in the area of environment, social, and governance, and has helped pioneer impactful concepts like IR and innovating path to net zero. He has conferred with the Global Competent Boards designation, GCBD, by Competent Boards Inc. He has also been awarded the Vivekananda Sustainability Awards 2022 by Vivekananda Youth Connect Foundation, presented with honorary PhD Doctor of Letters by ITM University. Welcome, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. Next, we have Mr. Ravi Mahajan, tax partner, EY. Mr. Mahajan is a tax partner in the technology, media, and telecommunication TMT market segment at EY in India, and the tax leader for the technology sector at EY India. He has worked with EY since the past 29 years and across locations such as Mumbai, New Delhi, and Bucharest. He has advised several multinational companies and has spoken at several conferences in India as well as abroad. Welcome, Mr. Ravi Mahajan. Also joining us on this panel is Mr. Anil Talreja, partner at Deloitte. Mr. Talreja is a partner with Deloitte India and is a part of the M&A tax group. He has over 27 years of experience in handling matters pertaining to the Indian tax and regulatory. He leads clients and industries for the tax practice. He has been involved in providing tax structuring services and tax due diligence for various retail and Alcobev clients, including listed companies in India and private equity venture capital investors. He also specializes in group restructuring involving mergers, demergers, spin-offs, and post-merger integration and cross-border acquisitions. He has been working very closely with senior executives of large companies on various initiatives in the consumer sector pertaining to brand and IP, GST, HR, FDI, amongst others. He has also been working with some of the quasi-governmental organizations and to understand their perspective. He works actively with key associations, including the Retailers Association of India, CII, on various matters pertaining to the consumer sectors. He has been a visiting faculty at various institutions like VC Circle, IIM Ahmedabad, ET Masterclass, and the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Welcome, Mr. Talreja.
Thank you.
Now, to moderate today's discussion, we have Dr. Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist for Dun & Bradstreet. As the Global Chief Economist of Dun & Bradstreet, Dr. Singh oversees the Global Economic Research Team, which conducts macroeconomic research, modeling, forecasting, and formulates pragmatic and solution-oriented analyses of strategic, economic, and business developments across 132 countries. Dr. Singh is a seasoned economist with over 2 decades of experience in the fields of quantitative and qualitative economic research, econometric modeling, forecasting, analytics, commodity research, customized research, and industry research. He is well known for economic research in the areas of real sector, public finance, monetary and fiscal policy, external sector, and the infrastructure and social sector. Before joining Dun & Bradstreet India, Dr. Singh was associated with the Tata Group, handling projects related to an in-depth analysis and research on various economic issues. A doctor in economics from University of Mumbai, Dr. Singh has published many thought leadership articles and papers across various subjects of business interests. Now I hand it over to Dr. Arun Singh to kickstart our very interesting panel discussion.
Thank you, Kaustav, for a wonderful introduction. It was great to hear all great things about us. So thank you for setting the context, and welcome everyone for the panel discussion on Budget Manthan 2023-24. We are looking forward for having a wonderful discussion today, and we have esteemed panelists with us today. And the budget this year was very important on multiple fronts. And a couple of years back, when India presented the budget, Indian and the masses were looking after, because we were doing during the pandemic. But on the 1st February 2023, when our finance minister was presenting, in fact, entire world was watching for the budget, because it was very critical. Why? Because it's just after pandemic. The concern related to the pandemic is subside significantly, not just in India, across many countries. Of course, there are some issues with some countries, but I think it's not the way it was a couple of years back or even last year. So we are much better shape. But there are concerns related to the economy upgradation, economy growth, not in just India. In fact, in the most of the developed market, especially in the Europe, is taking the different shape, different structure, and there's a risk of many countries going into the recession, and there are many countries started showing those signs. Interest rate is going up, inflation is still high, companies are facing those pain, their bottom line is going up, and headline information is not showing those what you call enough growth trajectory. Everyone is looking after the India, and seems that we had a couple of discussions for last couple of days, everything looking towards how this year budget is going to be implemented, and all the announcement during the budget will shape what we call towards the setting the base for the new era. We are talking about making India Atmanirbhar. We are talking about making India 5 trillion economy. We are talking about making India 10 trillion economy, and the things are taken care of through various channels, and talking about India at 100 years. With that, let me talk about report, some of the insight within the report before I ask our esteemed panelists for their viewpoint. So we created this report keeping in the mind what has been announced during the budget and how they're going to impact various sector, various segment, various set of the people. It was unique, and many people are talking about, including us, that it was something for everyone in India. Some qualitative measures, some policy guidelines, some initiatives, And for some, it's a quantitative announcement, whether they're putting more money in the hands of the sectors or thinking about multiplier impact or taking economy into the next leap. Three core areas our government tried to address. Of course, one was the capex. Every year when you talk about capex is higher than the previous year. This year is unique because we are spending after many years 3.3% of the GDP, and that's actually 11 times higher than one decade earlier. There is a significant push creating a digital economy, creating a knowledge economy, and I think pandemic has taught us a lesson that there are enough appetite for the digital economy, and I think we should leverage on that piece. And then fourth, of course, the inclusive agenda the government is talking about. And then fourth one, and that's very critical and I think very important during this age of sustainability, is the green growth. There enough and more measures are required, but I think government taking a shape which might give a good signal to the international investor, especially from the Europe. And talking about the tax revenue, putting in the productive sectors, and of course, those capital expenditure is certainly going to crowd in private investment. Let's see how that's going to crowd in, and we'll look after from some of the insight presented by our panelists. But let me talk about some of the sectors which we analyzed. So there are something 20 plus sectors we look at, both from the manufacturing space and then services sector. We look at how this analysis is going to impact those sectors. There's more green we can see. Some greens are very high. It's what we call a positive plus. Of course, we're talking about the inclusive agenda, we're talking about the infrastructure. There's impact on the positive plus. There's great initiatives taken, and I think last few years government is talking about infrastructure, putting money into the infrastructure and creating those what we call legacy of the higher infrastructure, especially the road. So you can see the good impact on that front. Other than that, we've covered broadly 5 agenda in the budget booklet. I just want to briefly touch base. One, I just talked about capex investment. It's almost 10 trillion Indian rupee they're putting it out, more than 11 times one decade earlier. 764 billion for the urban development, 2.4 trillion for the rural development, 2.7 trillion for the roads, and 2.4 trillion for the railways, highest ever allocation. That itself indicate about government intention on the infrastructure. As an economist, I know that infrastructure is create a multiplier impact and one of the core sectors for the economy, which not just create a job creation, also create a multiplier impact on the economy through the forward and the backward linkages. I think government have realized and they are doing their best in this part. And that's going to create a good multiplier effect on the economy. The second part, MSME. I think pandemic has taught that there are many MSME in the what we call bottom down have faced, and there was there's a risk of going out of the business. Last 20 years as a DNB, we are talking to the MSMEs and we are talking to them that what are the issues they are facing, which basically restricting their growth. Many issues they basically cited. We have created a library of all the issues, but couple of issues basically come top of the agenda is access to finance, which means basically financing related issues, and access to the market. Government tried to address those issues. I think when talk about the credit guarantee scheme and putting 90 billion money into this one, that's good for the company. We're talking about the deduction for expenditure incurred on the payment made to the MSMEs will be allowed only when the payment is actually made. There are some initiatives government have taken. I think that will certainly alleviate the working capital constraints of MSMEs and the promotes financial inclusion of the sector. That was the second. And the third, the ease of doing business. I think we need company come in, set up their plant and do the business, not just domestic, also the international company. We are looking for the foreign capital, we are looking at the FDI. Things should improve. For that, what the international investors are looking at, they're certainly looking at how we are trending on the ease of doing business. I think government is trying to act very hard to improve those space. We're talking about the entity DG locker, whether talking about the benefit of presumptive taxation from 20 million to 30 million, whether talking about unified skilled India digital, putting into the more money in the Digital India initiatives, and the PAN as a common identifier for the digital system of the specified government agencies, all is going to take what you call ease of doing business ranking improved, while the World Bank have discontinued, but I think on the ground government is doing its job. Now the fourth one is the green growth. I think this is great initiatives taken by the government, the constant effort government have taken last few years, which is going to not just nudge to the company, also to the international investors, that we are looking forward. We are looking forward to the target of zero carbon emission, which government have taken by 2070. There are initiatives been taken. Constantly they're talking about the green part, where they're talking about 350 billion for the priority capital investment, where they're talking about the scrapping of the old vehicle of the central government, the state government, more than 15 years, the custom duty extensions, exemption extended to import of capital goods for the machinery required for the manufacture of lithium ion cells for the batteries used in electric vehicles. Government is trying to give a signal to the domestic player as well as the international market that we are serious, we are committed to our green growth, and basically doing a wonderful job on that front. And the fifth, common man. Certainly the expectation from the common man was higher, but as an economist we should, I am also conscious about the fact that they need to worry about their income revenue and they need to worry about the expenditure. I think unless we create higher tax base, I think this was what we could expect maximum from the government. Of course, there are some initiative government have taken in terms of talking about new regime to the old regime. We'll speak about that part. Of course, rebate limit increased to 7 lakh rupees. There's a change in the slab is going to help the lower class of the income class of the population. That's going to help creating a disposable income, and of course expenditure. That's going to help all of us increasing the GDP growth rate and kickstart the recovery process. That was the summary we covered in the report, and with that I'll move to our panelists, and I'm looking forward for wonderful discussion and insight. And as Kaustav introduced, I think we have a wonderful talent on the dais, and I think I'm looking forward. During budget, two set of people get into the high demand mode, and of course economist and then chartered accountant. So I'm moving first towards the Sri Haribhakti ji. And what is your viewpoint about the budget? What is your view? What you feel? And how you analyze the budget? How you think this budget is unique and different than the previous year budget?
Thank you very much. This has been a watershed budget. In my view, this is a budget which signals an absolutely new India. And I'll tell you why I believe that. There are 5 streams of thought there. First is that through simplification, digitization, removal of arbitrage and removal of avoidance, we will finally have a very unique tax system which can move strongly towards tax determination with just leaping over the current paradigm of tax filing and tax assessment. Second, we are looking at capacity building in MSMEs and in state governments in a very big way. Everything that relates to capacity building is getting incentivized, and incentivized very strongly. Third stream that I identified, there's a whole lot of collaboration which will be required. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is no longer a slogan, it is being practiced in reality. State governments, central governments, city governments, municipal governments, individuals, corporates, NGOs, everybody will have to be brought into the whole idea of keeping the growth momentum at 10.5% of nominal GDP, which incidentally is also the rate at which the tax revenues are likely to increase. The fourth stream is the turning back of the Anthropocene villainy that our species has been practicing for the last 2 centuries. And that is so brilliantly reflected in the targeted ways in which we will recapture the path of keeping our temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Today, technology exists to make this happen. And it's fantastic that this budget promotes, incentivizes, and talks about all of these technologies, particularly in the light of getting artificial intelligence into all our lives in a big way. And finally, all future innovations are going to be at the intersection of digital properties and physical properties. The first sign of that is that the IT company, global IT company which has turned around is Meta. Why? Because they are creating a metaverse. And what is the metaverse going to be used for? It's going to be metaverse with a purpose. Exactly as the individuals who are creating NEOM, the digital first city, are doing. And that is going to be the playground for future innovation. All of these ideas get reflected from this budget statement. Therefore, I call it watershed.
Thank you, Mr. Haribhaktiji. I think that was a wonderful comment, and I think I agree with certain element that government is talking about. We're talking about MSME, digital economy. I think this is going to take India into the long way, I think. Moving to you, Mr. Talreja, I think the same, what is your viewpoint? And we heard Mr. Haribhakti is talking about that piece. What is your viewpoint about the budget, and how is scale budget, when I have to put a scale on, let's say 1 to 10, and 10 is great, 1 is still needs some improvement. Where you rate, and what is your viewpoint?
In my view, if I were to borrow the words of the finance minister, this is Amrit for all. There is a distribution of Amrit, and literally it's for all stakeholders. Every part of the society has got something in it for himself or herself in this budget. It is, as was mentioned by Mr. Singh, a huge expectation was that this will be a populist budget, given the fact that this is the last full budget perhaps before we get into the general elections. But against all expectations, this is actually a fearless budget. It's a very bold budget, and it is always said no news is good news. There was also a subtle expectation that there will be some kind of new tax which will be introduced in order to cough up or garner tax revenues, so that the report card that is displayed 1 year from now sort of indicates this sort of development and progress all over. But there's a very bold move of no new introduction of taxes. There is also a clear indication of movement to capital expenditure. As you rightly mentioned, there has been a surge in capital expenditure from 4 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores. That's been the announcement in the budget. So in a nutshell, this is a distribution of Amrit for all. Whether the Amrit is absolutely sweet, perhaps could have been sweeter, could have been much more bolder. I would still give an 8 on 10. And the reason why I would give an 8 on 10 is there are a few things which perhaps we could have expected better in the budget. And as you know, everybody has a perspective, and when anything is announced, it doesn't meet everyone's expectations. There are certain nuances, for example, the much talked about angel tax, which may create some sort of a obstacle for foreign investors in terms of ease of doing business in India. But barring that, and a couple of other things, I would still believe this is a very good budget. The government has put a lot of faith in the citizens of our country that they will sort of cooperate and collaborate together, every section of the society, to make our country one of the brightest spots in the world.
Yeah. 8 on 10, so there are significant scope for improvement. Thank you, Mr. Talreja. Now, moving to you, Mr. Mahajan, I think it is said that there are issues happening in terms of the recession in the developed market, and of course, some impact will be felt in India as well. And it's not with the fact that there are enough scope for improvement, and India is doing much better job. And the government has assumed tax buoyancy of 1, which means GDP growth of X percentage needs to match with the tax revenue percentage of the X. How you see that's going, and is there any risk to that target?
Well, I mean, the way I see it is that there are, unique factors which are playing out for India. One is the demographic dividend that we are enjoying. And with the, aspirations going up, you're subtly moving from a savings-based culture to a consumption-based culture. You've added disposable income in the hands of the taxpayers. So this will definitely boost consumption. Second is the multiplier effect of the capital expenditure increase which has been announced. So that should insulate us from global development. Third is the emphasis on Make in India, making India an alternative to China in global supply chains. So these are some of the factors which would, which will continue to, insulate us from global slowdown. And the fourth thing, which I think is also quite important, is that we speak about the demographic dividend, but India, the government is also enjoying a technology dividend because of digitization of the tax framework and the formalization of the economy. So you have a situation where there is a strong disincentive to be outside of the formal network. There is sharing of information which happens between the indirect tax administration and the direct tax administration. The tax administration comes to know much faster where is their tax evasion happening, which taxpayers are evading tax, which sectors, which region. So there is this technology dividend which the government is enjoying in the tax framework, and I think there is still some juice left in this play. I mean, the CBIC chairperson spoke about the number of tax registrants in GST being much lesser than what is there in the income tax system. So there's a significant play which is still left, and so therefore, given all of this, I think the tax buoyancy should continue to play out, and the numbers will reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Mahajan. I think you talked about alternative to China. I think during pandemic in India, that got a maximum boost, and taking that part forward. Coming to you, Mr. Haribhakti, I think India for some time is the largest, fastest growing emerging market, and government is trying to put money into the productive sectors. In that sense, keeping that, whatever government is doing, what do you think government should do and continue to do or do more to attract foreign investor and build those confidence in the foreign investor that at least whatever technology, capital investment we need for a growth to generate that much of revenue for the tax and for the upliftment of the society, what government should do to keep the faith in the Indian economy and of course option to the China?
Yeah. No, I think this is a question that has engaged our attention for many, many years. And I think there are three very distinct features that must happen to attract foreign investors. One, there should be a uniform treatment, fair treatment to all. And I think we are moving towards that kind of framework. If we can get there and we can keep a ultra-liberal permission infrastructure to swiftly grant permissions to people who want to invest in India, that would be the second key thing that must happen to attract foreign investment. And third, the dispute resolution mechanisms have to be sorted out. And in this budget, I was extremely happy to see two very critical announcements. One is the announcements on e-courts. I think that can be a big game changer for India. If we can get our disputes resolved speedily, nothing can be better than that for a foreign investor. The second is the idea that we will cut down all the pending disputes in the tax framework which are clogging all our tribunals and everything by simplifying the whole process of getting the information to the tribunal, they're considering it and speedily giving decisions. So if we are able to execute to these thoughts, which have been expressed in the finance minister's speech, I think we should create a very alluring investment, because there is no place on earth which can take in profitably that quantum of investment in infrastructure. None whatsoever. There's no other geography in the world which can profitably enhance infrastructure. And there is no other place on earth which has the same level of talent that India has. As I work with a lot of young people, I find that the potential and the innate talent that we have is so phenomenal. And that has become such a big attraction to people from all over the world. With these two advantages, nobody can beat India as a investment destination.
Thank you, Sri Haribhakti ji. I think that was wonderful comment. And, last few months, in fact, last 1 year, we are looking at our DNB data. And one surprising thing is happening, the inquiry from the international companies, they are basically trying to do the trade with domestic counterparts, have gone up significantly last few years. And the trade pattern is shifting from the traditional partner to, Latin America, America, Asia, to the Europe piece. And that's basically it's a double. Last 2-3 years a double, which means more and more European counterparts are basically coming to our database to find out the company who is basically good to do the trade and do the business with that. And that's gone up. That's a wonderful development. I think what the government have done in last few years, trying to focus on some of the unorganized sectors, especially the MSME, and trying to bring them into the main driving force, recognize them and then find out their capacity and create those what you call multiplier synergy with them. And I think with that, Mr. Talreja, coming to you on that part, this budget and the last couple of that, there's a focus of self-help groups. I think this time the government talking about the women self-help groups and how they want to promote that segment to contribute to the economic growth and add to the revenue of the economy. The way government have done to formalize the economy, whether you talk about the demonetization, GST and making the Digital India initiatives, now when go to the rural sector, the people are basically doing the online payment. I think there is a potential in this segment. You think government have done enough, there are certain things required to do to promote this segment?
Well, India has one of the largest consumption markets. There is absolutely no doubt. The consumption capacity of our country is phenomenal. If you look at the way the government has gone about emphasizing the MSME sector, it has, the government has for the last, I think, 4 or 5 budgets continued to put their feet on the paddle to bring in the MSME sector in the limelight. Today, as we speak, I think there are roughly about 6 crore MSMEs operating in our country, which is, frankly, given the size and the potential of our country, which is fairly less. But I think the government is trying its best, and it's clearly evident from these announcements. Every year, year on year, the government is trying to boost this particular sector. Now, for any sector or a section of an enterprise to grow, I think we need to have 2 or 3 things. The first is bring that entrepreneurial mindset, which is what the government has tried to do, where you have the self-help women, the artisans, and the local workers, villagers who are actually putting in all their efforts, and there's enough incentive for them as well. The second is to give them the financial strength, and the way the government has done it year on year, they have provided credit schemes, they have provided incentives, they have provided enough you know, platforms and financial sort of streams to these individuals to tap their potential and to go ahead and continue to manufacture one of the best quality products. And the third, which is the most important, is how do these MSMEs tap our consumers? You know, if you look at consumers in the big cities or the tier 3 cities, you will realize that there's too much of gap between the price that a consumer pays in a larger city compared to the cost of production. How does a MSME take advantage and grab the full profit margin between the cost of production and the cost of sales? So the government is trying to bring about digitization in order to ensure that the MSME sector is able to grab the market share and the profitability of every single product that is being manufactured. So I think with that, the intention of the government is very clear. It wants the MSME sector to boost further. It wants this sector to expand, and more importantly, to also get strength from an economy standpoint, because there is a sizable number of India's population that sits as part of that sector. And if this is the sector that prospers, I think there's nothing that will stop our country to prosper further.
Thank you, Mr. Talreja. I think you talked about MSME and you talked about the digital piece. I think that's what government is trying to do to bring them into the mainstream. They need to basically make it formal, and they need to basically make it more of a visible, and that's, I think there is no other way to make them digitally sound and capable of doing this one. Now, I think government is trying to make it more formal, and with that, coming to you, Mr. Mahajan, I think government last year they're talking about DigiLocker, and I think we all are using some form or other. And this year they're trying to form the entity DigiLocker, trying to expand to the use of MSME, large corporate and charitable trust. What do you see the opportunity for the government, for all of us, especially the MSME, and how this thing can be capitalized and leveraged?
Yeah. So, I mean, what is a DigiLocker? DigiLocker is, a 1 GB space which the Digital India Corporation provides on the cloud, where you can store, where every Aadhaar, holder can store scanned copies of important documents. So you can have your, vehicle documents, your Aadhaar, your passport copies, insurance policies, all of that stored, and mark sheets of students stored in the system. So there is the boost which is being provided to this, because what will happen is that once you provide these documents to, let's say, to your bank for opening up a bank account, you will not need to provide again the same set of documents to go and obtain a passport copy or a credit card or an insurance policy. So there will be a cut down in repetitive tasks, and that will increase the speed at which last mile delivery services are provided to the citizens of India. And this is all structured around Aadhaar, which is all individual based. The change that the government has announced or intends to do is to make it available for entities as well. So whether it's MSMEs, whether it's large business houses, charitable trusts. And I think this will be because PAN permanent account number has been identified as the common business identifier. So I think as compared to individuals, which is Aadhaar based, I think for entities it will be PAN based, where again entities can store their important documents, registration documents, legal contracts, financial statements, which can very easily be provided to their business counterparts, to their regulators, where these organizations can then download these documents and cut down on timing for conducting verification and due diligence exercises. So this will again increase the speed at which business activities can be conducted.
Thank you, Mr. Mahajan. I think let's see how MSME is basically trying to use this facility, and all of us, getting a benefit from this one. Coming to you, Mr. Haribhakti, I think government is trying to have a all-inclusive growth agenda, and this time coming up the term, the green growth. and that's what they're focusing on. Now, green growth, government have agenda. They're trying to put some information base. They're trying to put some money in the certain sectors where we can create a capacity and build on that. Now, it's up to the company who basically have to understand the part of this green piece, the part of the environment piece, the part of the governance, the sustainability, and taking economy in that space. Some of the global counterpart, they are doing faster than all of us, but there's a need. With that, I think there are something what we call ESG framework in India. It's slightly slow. If I have to look at last few years, it was just 1,000 companies earlier, but now the government initiative is going after that. So what do you think what government and the company should do to make it ESG adoptions more formal among the large company at least? And there's a framework being created, everyone is talking about. Do you see any opportunity, what is your viewpoint to make it more in depth even in the large corporate framework?
Thank you. Wonderful question, my favorite question. I was at a meeting at the Swiss Consul General's residence where I was meeting a Swiss corporation, and I narrated to them what capabilities India has developed in terms of automating the entire process of compliance with the BRSR. And they were stunned that we could, through our markers, automate the reporting on BRSR, convert it readily into a GRI reporting, and just do everything in a facile manner, SBTI included, everything together. So India, in terms of developing the technology and the software for compliance, is really marching ahead at a speed that I didn't anticipate. It's just fantastic. So that's one great thing. The second big thing that we are doing in India, and that is being incentivized by announcements in this budget, is that we are now focused on action, not on reporting. Reporting is the end product. What we need to actually get done is action. So, let me give you an idea of what are the Innovate to Zero 3 ideas which will drive sustainability in our country. Number one, we are the fastest adopters of two-wheeler EV. The growth of two-wheelers in EV has been runaway. Today, to buy a EV car from Tata, you have to wait for 4 months. So we are very fast adapters of EV. EV station infrastructure is coming up at a very rapid pace. So that is huge. Energy transition is happening at a pace which is absolutely wonderful. With the 19,000 crores announced for the hydrogen mission, we should see a reduction of 1 million tons of carbon by 2030, which is absolutely stunning. And this is what is going to sharpen India's lead as a country which is serious about ESG.
True.
In terms of governance, we have seen some episodes yesterday, day before, which have stunned us, but it's governance which is going to turn these episodes around. The only big way in which people can, going forward, be in a position to redeem reputation, trust, and all of that is great governance. And social responsibility. Now, I was just reading a report that companies which have diversity, and here they defined it narrowly as 3 women on a board, other than the 1 compulsory mandatory women, they are 5x times more able to work on sustainability issues, which is a stunning statistic. It's a research-based statistic. Yeah. And so I think in terms of fair treatment, equality, diversity, equity, India is on a tremendous path. It's not these 1,000 companies. We have to look at the scope 3 impact of all MSMEs getting into this whole program, because the big boy simply cannot be net zero if the small boy isn't net zero. And so it's critical that everybody gets into the framework. It's not the 1,000 companies, it is their supply chains.
Yeah, that's true.
If they get ready, then we'll have a revolution. And that's what's going to happen.
I think I'll come back to you on that integration part and your what you call supply chain of the companies, not just main company, suppliers, customer, how this international company look at those and if you want to grow into the international space, there is no option than going by compliant to the ESG. So I'll come back to you on that. Now from the environment, I think let's move to the common man. I think when I say common man, so all of us are professional. I'm an economist, but also I pay the tax. And last 1 year we're talking about regime shift. I think government came up with this term of the old regime with the new regime. Still there is some doubt and confusion, and which one to go after. If you have no investment, of course, we know that's one. But in order to know more from from our expert, I think I'll come to you, Mr. Talreja, that how you see this old regime vis-a-vis new regime, and which one should be good for the countries to take it ahead, and how we basically view it. Maybe when we meet 3rd February 2024 to decode the next year budget, maybe we'll have a different stuff. Keeping that in the mind, what is your viewpoint?
Well, I think we all know that change is the only constant. And this is a clear example where our government and the Honorable Finance Minister has made very critical announcements with changing times. A significant portion of our population today is the millennials. And we all know and recognize in all walks of life that millennials do not believe in saving. If you give an option of buying a house or renting a house, the answer is clearly renting a house. Maybe that's something which perhaps has dovetailed the finance minister to shift the paddle heavily towards the new regime. But because the new regime, as we understand, doesn't, from a tax perspective, encourage savings. Although the old school of thought, and I still refer to that as the old school of thought, is that you need to save for the rainy day. But that perhaps may be short-lived. I think on the technical side, I think we need to go back to the drawing board for every common man, as you said, or common woman, to figure out whether the new regime is better or the old regime is better. But perhaps this may be for the last time, as hinted by the finance minister, but because the new regime is now going to be the default regime, and maybe in 2024 the old regime will not exist. Having said all of that, I think what is also important is, do we really invest just to take the tax benefit out of it, or do we invest for long-term security? I think that's the question that we need to answer and also understand. I think if you take a survey, which is what we did, you will realize that a lot of the people will say that I did not invest only for getting the tax benefit. In the earlier past, when the tax rates were very high, people used to do it. Now we've got the basic exemption increased, where up to 7 lakhs there is no tax in the new regime. I think all these incentives are clearly giving an indication that, look, make your investments for the rainy day. Don't consider tax as the driving force. Having said that, we will also reduce your tax rates, gradually depending on your slab of income. So I think the new order is the new regime, as I put it. Perhaps the old regime will die out. The critical aspect is there are some clear differentiators between the new and the old. And the one stunning differentiator is something that pretty much everyone in the salary sector gets, and that is HRA. Because HRA perhaps is now the decision factor to choose between the old and the new. But keeping that aside, I think the message is clear that we need to look towards migrating to the new regime, which is perhaps more simpler and less of compliance.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Talreja. I think you mentioned about the simplicity, and I think even FM mentioned about new regime will be more simple, but they've just given an extension, the exemption in the new regime as well. So how you view this simplification? Rather, they should have just increased the rebate amount or something. So why exemption into the new regime?
Well, I think it's perhaps just to get people to adjust to the new regime. I wouldn't be surprised that they withdraw all exemptions in the next year from the new regime, because remember, the government's agenda a few years ago was to try and withdraw as many exemptions as possible. Perhaps just to sort of dilute the effect of the new versus old, they've sort of kept a few exemptions, but I wouldn't be surprised if these are eliminated in the next year.
Let's see, we are looking forward next year, and let's see, generally most of the people started moving to the new regime, but that remained one of the some of the biggest concern for the common man. Moving to the digital space, Mr. Mahajan, I think we are talking about, and Sri Harbhakti talked about digital economy and those, and Mr. Talreja is talking about the digitization of the MSMEs. What's happening, I think government have taken initiatives, and the last 2 years, we all have learned about the digital space and the use of the digital technology, digital methods. Otherwise would have been much laggard economy, and the use of the digital space have fast tracked by something 7 to 10 years. That's what various research suggests. But still there's awareness issues. Still there are concerns that MSME don't know about the digital technology. What do you think government should, if you're talking about the digital space and trying to leverage on that space, what narrative government should build, initiative government should take to take those pieces to the masses, that the company are using those pieces? Your point.
Yeah, I think with some of the initiatives that the government has taken, I think there is a lot of folks have kind of got used to doing things digitally. I mean, demonetization and making payments digitally, I think forced a lot of us to kind of use technology tools to deal with day-to-day transactions. I think the really exciting part, and I think one of the most difficult parts, is to try and do this in the agricultural sector, because that is one of the most difficult bastions when it comes to digitization. And with the announcement of the Agriculture Accelerator Fund and some of the other initiatives that the government has announced, the government is keen that they take the benefits of digitization to the agricultural sector as well. We are seeing an ecosystem also getting built with some PE funding, VC funding going towards agri-techs in India. So that's a very good and positive sign. And we should also remember that India is one of the most reasonable telecom services in the world in terms of pricing. Cost of data transmission is also very low, which is very important from a conducting business activity standpoint. The telecom subscriber base that we have, out of a population of about 130 crores, we have more than 115 crores telecom subscribers in India. So that's a very strong ecosystem that we have in India. And if you can use tools like AI, Chat GPT, break down language barriers, get into the vernacular way of doing things, then you have a good ecosystem getting built from a technology standpoint, funding standpoint, and with the investments going into the transportation sector, so you have a logistics connectivity which is getting built. So given all of this, I think it's getting used to doing things digitally in all sections of our society is something which will happen very soon.
Well, thank you. I think we are looking forward that I think the lowest strata of the society should start using this piece. That's how we'll talk about the success of the Digital India initiatives, and I'm looking forward for that. Now coming to you, Mr. Hari Bhakti ji, I think you mentioned about ESG piece for the corporate, and where I look at my database, DNB database, and I said that most of the company come and they look at the health of the companies, whether they're good or bad for their businesses, and they basically get engaged and start trading. One of the things they basically look at to the ESG compliant ESG rating of those companies, and for the European it's much required and it's very must, and they look up and the inquiry is going up. Now how companies can leverage, how companies can get benefited from those inquiry coming in, because they are not going out. In fact, the global companies coming and trying to do the trade, which means they need to be ESG compliant. How you think that the MSME itself to basically step up to create those space for themselves, to make themselves ESG compliant and look after in that area, so as at least they get great businesses from the global counterpart?
Super question, because it's critical to India's future.
Yeah.
So what have we done? We have created 3 horizontal stacks. We started with the identity stack. We gave the entire population of India that was eligible Aadhaar in the shortest period that the world has known. No place on earth has done it as fast as we did it. Then we created UPI, which is the payment stack. And today India is #1 digital payment capital of the world. I've called it that in my public speeches and writings. It's absolutely the capital of digital payments. And then we created the DigiLocker stack, where not only records, as was mentioned by Mr. Mahajan, can be stored, but even our health data can be stored. And our capabilities defined in terms of KRAs can be stored. And so it becomes accessible on a permission basis. Now, on these 3 stacks, which is called the India stack, we are creating 3 vertical stacks or more, multiple vertical stacks. And these are the ones, the company that I chair, Protean, is creating the vertical stacks of agriculture, education, and health. But there are many companies which are creating multiple such stacks. So what should the MSME do? I'm recommending that the banking system should take on the responsibility, and we have created a software product to enable this called STARE. STARE is a product which will enable the MSMEs to save in cost, because they simply don't have cost data. And so we can enable that through the banking. So the data fabric will be stitched by the banking system. And bankers will be the future accountants for the MSME sector, is the thought I have shared with 2 of the largest banks in the country, and they kind of like the idea. Then there is technology. How can you make it available to them on a SaaS model, as pay as you go, affordable, democratized? And that will be provided again through a utility. APIs written and connectors in place. Accountancy and HR. They simply don't have the accounting. So there's an adversarial relationship. Every time the MSME gives information, you say it's late, it's not right, and then there's an audit, and there is all kinds of rubbish which creates a friction. And then there's information, and then there's restructuring. These guys will need to collaborate, come together, merge, do everything. So we are recommending strongly that this is the input that must happen through the banking universe. Become the accountants to 6 crore MSMEs. There's huge, and then everything will change. Yeah. The whole relationship between MSMEs and the big boys will transform, because there'll be capacity built, and there'll be data which is clean and reliable, which they can use. And all this will be done not just for the financial capital, but for the 6 capitals of integrated reporting. And thereby the MSME will be pulled into ESG automatically. Because while you're collecting financial data sets, you can collect data sets which deal with carbon and with energy and with social parameters and with governance parameters, and introduce them for the first time to the joys of doing ESG and the freedom to operate with money available on tap when you need it, not that whole frictional relationship that we get a DNB rating or get some rating. We won't deal with you without that. DNB ratings also will become precious if this kind of transformation happens. And we can see it happening in like 12 months. We can transform the relationship within the ecosystem of MSME and banking, and also NBFCs and even peer-to-peer lending. All of that will be automated, can be automated through a platform.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm looking forward for next 12 months, and probably we'll meet next year same time to decode budget 2025.
Maybe in June,
Yeah,
after the election.
interim budget. Actually, I'm talking about. Yeah.
No interim budget, vote on account.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I know actually we are almost on the time, so I have just final set of requests to other panelists. Coming to you, Mr. Talreja, what is your final concluding viewpoint? 2-minute concluding point.
Well, I think as I mentioned, this is a budget for all. I think everybody has to figure out what is the benefit that he or she has in this budget and take the advantage of it. There is a very consistent promise by our government that they will continue to, keep that momentum going. There is a lot of certainty. There is assurance or guarantee or whatever you may call. There is the trust in the government that, look, we will ensure that the country goes to the next level. And I think we just need to ensure that we work alongside the various stakeholders, the infrastructure, the periphery, for us to be successful. So I feel the trust factor between in tax language between the taxpayer and the taxman, or people and the government or the policy makers, is a very critical aspect of this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Talreja. Mr. Mahajan, your 2-minute concluding remark.
Sure. So I think we should not really be be worried about global slowdown, recession, inflation talk. I think we should be confident. Everybody is speaking that this is the Amrit Kal. So we should go into this phase with a very high level of confidence. There is a lot of things which are playing out for us. There is technology, there is the right focus in terms of where to spend money, capital instead of revenue. And we have a huge, workforce, a huge consumption base. So all of these factors, would really play out in India's favor. So therefore, we should really look forward to this coming phase with a high degree of confidence.
Thank you. Shri Hari Bhakti ji, your final thoughts, 2 minutes.
Only one word:
Oh, thank you.
collaboration. That's what this budget is asking all of us to do. The onus has shifted to us, and we need to collaborate with everybody: governments, regulators, municipal corporations, everybody.
Thank you. I think you well said. I think that's what basically we're looking at. It was wonderful conversation. I think we had multiple viewpoint, multiple insights, and it's all great. And it's no doubt, I think it was a election budget, but it was not a populist. It was basically realistic, and it had something for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's talked about the capex expenditure, which is significantly high, talking about rationalizing some of the income tax structure, which is good initiatives, talking about the MSME growth, talking about the green growth, and talking about what Mr. Hari Bhakti talked about, the collaboration. So with that, we'll conclude today's conversation, and I'm looking forward for the implementation of this budget, and looking forward the multiplier effect is going to create for the economy and take India into the 5 trillion economy and 20 trillion economy. Thank you.
All right, so I have to say this was a truly, truly thought-provoking session, and I'm sure that all of you agree with me on that. And like how the saying goes, that all good things have to come to an end, and so does Budget Manthan 2023 for all of us. I'm sure that all of you have a lot of enriching takeaways from today's discussion. On this concluding note, I would like to thank all of our esteemed speakers who have made time for us today to have this discussion with us. And lastly, I would also like to thank each and every one of you who has joined us today on this Budget Manthan discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. This is me, Kaustubh Bhattacharya, signing off.